Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Breeze Time with Kathy. Well, this is the third in my series of a day trip to the French Quarter, and with me as your virtual tour guide. So, I promise we'll finish up today. I hope you enjoy it. Well, this is our third uh, part of our walk through the French Quarter, our French Quarter tour. Hadn't always been a walk. We did go ahead, and after walking through the area around the Jackson Square, I took you on a ride on through the streets of the French Quarter on a carriage. But right now, as we leave, after having had a nice lunch at Acme Oyster Bar, let's go ahead and visit Lafitte's blacksmith shop. Now, Lafitte's blacksmith shop is located right here on the corner of Bourbon Street and St. Philip. As you can see it's a very typical construction for that time period, back around early 1800s, late 1700s. You can see the timbers with the bricks in between, and that's very common. Another way that they used to construct with the timbers, the French did. This was typical of the French and Spanish colonial period. They would take Spanish moss and mud and pack it in there. But this is brick. That was a little bit sturdier construction, and pack it in between the timbers. And this building was used as a blacksmith shop by the brother of the famous pirate Jean Lafitte. Now, Jean Lafitte was a privateer, and his brother Pierre was also a privateer, but he operated this blacksmith shop as a legitimate business, and it was sort of a front for the smuggling business that his brother ran out of Barataria Bay. Barataria Bay was south of New Orleans, but coming up through the bayous, you could reach New Orleans pretty easily. As a matter of fact, they would have come right past the area where my home I grew up in, but it's not that far from Barataria Bay, and not when you come through the swamps the way you used to be able to come. It was probably only about 5 or 6 miles when you came through the bayous and across the swamps. And they would bring their goods that way and bring them into New Orleans. And mostly he was a privateer, which means that he had received a letter of marque from different governments in order to attack their enemies on the high seas, and he was allowed to keep their whatever they got off the ships. So, but he was basically a pirate and a smuggler. The British offered him a large amount of money at the time of the War of 1812. The British came to him and offered him a great deal of money to join them, to join the British Navy in attacking the Americans. They wanted to control New Orleans, understanding that control of New Orleans would mean control of the entire middle of the United States, the entire Mississippi Valley. After all, it had only recently been sold by France to the United States, only about 10 years before. But instead, Lafitte offered his services to Andrew Jackson in exchange for not money, but a full pardon for himself and any of his men who chose to participate in the battle. They proved invaluable, and he and his men were granted that full pardon. Now, Lafitte went back to his privateering in Texas and Mexico, but some of his men became highly respected citizens of New Orleans afterwards. For example, Dominic Yu became one of Jean Lafitte's lieutenants became a very important citizen of New Orleans and was highly respected. He had led a gun battery that was quite effective, a cannon battery at the Battle of New Orleans that helped a lot. Here's a picture of Jean Lafitte, that dashing pirate. He does look very French to me. As a matter of fact, I've known a lot of Cajuns who had a similar look as he does. Dated one, as a matter of fact. Big mistake. Big mistake. The man was no more trustworthy than a scoundrel and a pirate. This is Pirates Alley. It runs alongside the cathedral. It originally got that name because, of course, if you remember, the cathedral stands close to the faces the river. So they would bring their goods up through this alley and up to the river so that they could smuggle their goods out across the Mississippi River. This was also, Pirates Alley also was the home of a famous American author, William Faulkner. He lived here for a time. As a matter of fact, he lived, I believe, right up here. And he gathered around him. He lived there with a New Orleans artist, and it became a sort of haven for artsy and literary people of New Orleans during the 20s. He later moved on to France and Paris and became one of the members of the Lost Generation. Well, let's continue down. This is Pat O'Brien's. Pat O'Brien's is a famous bar in New Orleans, and the reason I mention it was because they created the Hurricane, which is a drink famous in New Orleans because it's in a glass that's shaped like a hurricane lantern or the top of an oil lamp. It contains several different kinds of things. And when I was a teenager, 18 was a legal drinking age, so the first thing you did when you turned 18 was you went to Pat O'Brien's and you had hurricanes, and that was a big deal. And Pat O'Brien's had a big outdoor patio where you would sit. This is another famous restaurant. This is the Court of the Two Sisters, and I've spoken sometimes about our housekeeper when I was a child, and who remained a close family friend throughout her life, and that was Nancy McGinnis, and she actually had been a cook here for the Court of the Two Sisters. They're famous for their beautiful courtyard, and this is a picture of it right here. New Orleans courtyards were very important because, as you saw, the houses sat right on the streets. It was there in the courtyards of the houses where you could, all the rooms, as you see, they have the doors open onto the balconies and the breezes could come in. It's very hot in New Orleans. And there in the courtyards is where you would have your peace and your quiet. The fountains would provide a wonderful escape. The noise of the bubbling fountains would not only be a source of water, but would also, the noise would sort of silence the noise of the city. What do you call it? Overcome the noise of the city around you. It would make it a place of refuge and escape. Well, this is a jazz funeral passing by. And as you can see, they're on their way to the cemetery, and a jazz band is leading them. Jazz funerals do still happen in New Orleans. They are traditional, and this is on the way to the cemetery. It's somber, and as the casket is carried, the band plays more stately hymns. One of the most popular, of course, would be Just a Closer Walk with Thee, almost the anthem of New Orleans when it comes to hymns for funerals. Just a closer walk with Thee, granted Jesus is my plea. And that's the way you progress to the cemetery. Oh, but when you come back, it's time to form, it's time to celebrate, because you celebrate that that person is now with the saints in heaven. You celebrate their life. You go off to have a party, and the traditional thing you play is When the Saints Go Marching In. And you play it with a nice upbeat tempo. Everybody grabs a white handkerchief or an umbrella, and it's time to form. You go ahead and you form a line, and you dance. And you dance all the way out as they play When the Saints Go Marching In. Oh, when the saints bum 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 bum, and everybody shakes their they form a line. Because death is viewed as the end of the pains of this life, and that person is in heaven. Let's celebrate who they were and where they are now. Well, part of New Orleans traditions. This right here is actually the Royal Orleans Hotel. It looks traditional, but it's not. It's a new construction. Well, new for the I think it was built in the 60s. It was actually designed by my uncle, and it was made to fit in with the I think he tore down some ugly new buildings built in the 20th century, early 20th century, to build the hotel. He wanted it to fit in with the historic character, and he built this the Royal Orleans Hotel. And as a matter of fact, I spent my honeymoon right there in that suite at the Royal Orleans Hotel. But he built it to make it fit in with the character of the French Quarter. Most people think it's been there forever. Well, voodoo is associated with New Orleans. I don't put much stock in voodoo myself, being a Methodist minister. However, it is part of New Orleans history and tradition. Voodoo is a blended religion. If you go as we go into the museum, you'll see not only Roman Catholic saints, images of the Madonna, but you'll see traditional African symbols. It's a blend between ancient West African spiritual beliefs brought over by enslaved people, much of it developed in Haiti and in the islands like in Haiti and in the Bahamas and islands like that, by the enslaved people, and blended with the Catholicism that they were exposed to there. And they brought in elements of Christianity with it too. And it's a system of belief. Now, the most famous practitioner of New Orleans voodoo, historically, is probably Marie Laveau. These are all elements from the Voodoo Museum. This is a portrait of Marie Laveau. She was born in 1801. She was of Haitian descent. She was a free woman of color. And she married a free man of color. New Orleans had a very large, very significant population of free people of color. And though slavery, of course, unfortunately did exist, there was a significant population of free people of color. Marie Laveau, uh, her profession was as a hairdresser, but she was also a herbalist. She was known to be a devout Roman Catholic. She uh, was a practitioner of traditional medicine and also of voodoo. She became voodoo queen, and she held that position for an extremely long time. Later in life, she had a daughter who greatly resembled her, who was also named Marie. And she was known as Marie Laveau, and it gave the illusion that she didn't age. And the original Marie Laveau, who lived to age 79, sort of did not make a lot of public appearances, and it gave the illusion that she did not age, and her daughter did very much. There were public demonstrations of voodoo gatherings in places like Congo Square, where snake handling was something that was done. But there were other things that Marie did. She was known to visit with condemned prisoners and to pray with them and to intercede for pardons when she felt that they were innocent. And she was often effective in doing that. She was an interesting person. As I said, she was quite long-lived. She lived to age 79. This is believed to be her tomb in St. Louis Cemetery number 1. You see the X's on it. That is because some people believe that she is still capable as a voodoo queen of answering requests made of her. Traditionally, the X's are made with a soft brick, so they're made in red brick, and you make a request from her and you leave a small offering. It's kind of interesting how things are. I remember when I was a child and seeing the tomb, being fascinated and frightened by it, not quite knowing what to think about voodoo. Of course, as you go through New Orleans, and if you talk to the people who do the ghost stories, they're going to tell you all kinds of things about her, that she's been seen many times after her death. And there are reports dating back from the time of her death where she's supposedly been seen on the streets of New Orleans. Now, this is Napoleon House. And the reason it's called Napoleon House is because it was built in 1794, and the first occupant was Nicholas Girard, and he was mayor of New Orleans from 1812 to 1815. Now, in 1825, the house was offered as a refuge to Napoleon. Napoleon at that time was exiled on St. Helena Island. And remember Dominic Yu? He had been a lieutenant under Jean Lafitte, who earned a pardon by fighting heroically at the Battle of New Orleans and had become a respected citizen of New Orleans. He was going to lead a rescue mission and rescue Napoleon from St. Helena. And so this was going to be Napoleon's home. But however, before Dominic Yu could organize the ship to take him, Napoleon died. But this building has maintained the title of Napoleon House ever since then. It's now a bar and has been for a long time. It's actually got a very nice courtyard and an interesting place. Why don't we've been wandering around the city all afternoon, so why don't we have a seat here on the courtyard and have have some refreshment. Well, we've done a lot of history. How about we just do some browsing and some shopping? There's a lot of antique stores in New Orleans. Let's go into the one in this building. This is one of the more famous buildings, originally built as a bank. It's now an antique store. This building was built by Benjamin Henry Latrobe, and a famous architect, dating back to actually he was the architect of the Capitol at one point. And let's go in here and browse the wonderful antique shops along Royal Street. Well, it's time for dinner. Let's head to Antoine's Restaurant. Antoine's Restaurant is another one of the five-star restaurants in New Orleans. It was founded by Antoine Alciator in 1854, I believe. And it is one of the oldest restaurants in New Orleans. So we'll go ahead and dine in the Rex room. This room is filled with memorabilia from the Rex Mardi Gras ball. You can see this is a queen's gown right over here. And these are images of all the kings who were Rex, which was the kings of Mardi Gras. There's even because membership of the Mardi Gras crews, the clubs, which are called crews, is secret. There's actually a private or secret entrance to Antoine's so that they can come to these dining rooms and plan their parades and their Mardi Gras balls. So we're fortunate enough that this is not one of the nights that they're going to be here, so we can dine here in this room. And let's see what we'll have in the way of food. Oysters Rockefeller. Antoine's developed oysters Rockefeller, actually, one of the famous dishes that they actually developed and named. They named it Rockefeller because it was the dish was so rich, they named it after the richest person in the United States. I want some good seafood gumbo. I haven't had seafood gumbo in a long time. And, I want some, and Antoine makes excellent seafood gumbo. Now, there's many things we could have, but I'm a little homesick. So I'm going to have soft-shell crab. I love soft-shell crab. But then I'm my mother's daughter, and she loves soft-shell crab. I hope you enjoy it. Enjoy whatever you choose from this wonderful Creole French cuisine menu. But for dessert, we'll have baked Alaska. I completely blew my diabetic diet, but Antoine's baked Alaska is world famous. Let's enjoy. And thank you for indulging me on this visit to the French Quarter in my hometown of New Orleans. Well, now what do? Well, let's wander the streets of New Orleans and walk down. Of course, there's strip joints and all these kinds of things, and we don't have to go into any of them. We'll just enjoy some of the nightlife. And we'll end the evening at Preservation Hall and listen to some authentic New Orleans jazz. Well, thank you for indulging me and accompanying me on this visit to New Orleans, my hometown. And I'm glad to spend this time with you each week. Until next time, God bless you.